Glory Days, the Catholic League of New Orleans, Part 3, is underwritten by Leonard C. Quick & Associates Consulting and Forensic Engineers, Troy, Henry & Henry Consulting, Dr. Robert Griesaber, and the Willwoods Community.
For every yard gained, there is glory. And that glory has gained a collective hold on the culture of New Orleans. Each year, hundreds put on a uniform. Thousands fill the bleachers. Loyalties run deep. Rivalries are legendary. And with every win or loss, there's always a story.
Particularly when we're talking about the Catholic League, the richness of that narrative was not just the games, but the backdrop, the context within which those games were played.
Any Catholic League game on a Friday night, you never know what it is you're going to see. You never know when that great moment may happen that you're going to remember for the rest of your life.
This is the story of a journey rewarded and a duty done. Glory Days, the Catholic League of New Orleans. The journey continues and the story grows. Stories about those who, on the field of the Catholic League, left behind them not just their all, but their glory.
There are no goal line stands that can hold back the drive of time, but glory endures as long as the memories are evoked.
I have a very vivid memory of the clackling of our cleats against the backdrop of all the fan and band noises. I can still hear it. And the anxiety of knowing that in just a little while, we were going to battle. I still get chills thinking about it.
Here in Louisiana, the memories of gridiron greats are called to mind every time a new crop of players hit the fields throughout the state.
We go back and we meet with the current players. One of the questions that came up on one of those meetings in the locker room, he said, "What was it you remember most about playing football?" And I told him, I said, when you come out to the runway and you hear that fight song and the hair stands up on the back of your neck, and they said, yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about. I said, well, you're going to feel that 50 years later when that fight song plays.
Prep football has been a part of the fabric of the Crescent City since the early part of the last century.
It's kind of a way of life.
It was a major component of the whole fabric of the city of New Orleans.
It's a way of life. You must have high school football.
Football took hold in New Orleans with the beginning of the city's first great rivalry between Jesuit and Warren Easton in 1915. St. Aloysius fielded its first team in 1921, and Holy Cross followed in 1922 when its booster club raised a total of $150 to pay a coach.
In that first year in 1922, when Jesuit and Holy Cross met, no one was aware that this would be something that would lasts through the decades.
In November 1940, the growing popularity of the rivalry and high school football was on full display in City Park Stadium.
Holy Cross and Jesuit were both undefeated, and they played at City Park Stadium. They sold the entire stadium out, which held 27,000 people, and they ended up selling like 44,000 tickets total.
In 1955, with 11 high school football teams taking the field in the city, the time had come to split districts, and the Catholic League was born.
I think the Catholic League brings tradition like no other district. You know, these teams have been together since the 50s.
Tradition, 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 tradition.
It was a badge of honor to be a part of that league.
It's area of town against area of town. Everybody is territorial. And our group's going to beat your group.
It was talent every week. Every week you had to bring it.
It would be no different than the SEC today.
It was a challenge. It was a war week in and week out.
I don't know if I would have put my child out there with those people. Okay, to tell you the truth. I mean, it was really bad.
It was the best league. It produced the most competitive teams. It produced the biggest crowds, the most enthusiastic fans.
Somebody asked me one time, me being from Alabama, why did you go to Louisiana? I said, well, did y'all ever play before 45, 46,000 people? And they said, no. Well, why, have you? I said, yeah. And it's just such a big time thing, high school football in New Orleans.
It was in front of these escalating Catholic League crowds that boys became men and some became legends. Like the league's first MVP, Tyrone Clark, and his St. Aloysius teammates Don Godet, Andy Bourgeois, and Butler Powell.
Never forget. You never forget who you lost to rather than who you beat.
Names like Jesuit's Kenny Morton and Jack Labourde, De La Salle's Butch Coco and Adrian 88 Mentel, and Holy Cross's Billy Truax constantly captured the city's headlines.
High school games had the front page of the sports page, headlines. All through the sports page, they had stories about prep football.
Stories were written about future football legends like Herman Butch Dewey.
Tough athlete, good guy, nice guy, very, very competitive.
And the versatile Tyler LaFauci.
He's the only player to this date to be named to the All-State team the same year on both offense and defense.
Before John Fourcade played for the Saints, he played for an archbishop.
Shaw became Shaw when John Fourcade went to Shaw.
He was like the first kid on the field, last kid to leave.
I just remember thinking just how physically gifted, how strong and fast, and how sometimes it just seemed like he was just a man among boys the way he played.
John Fourcade was a man at 15 years old. Come on, I didn't even have a hair on my body when I was 15.
John Fourcade believed that John could get it done, you know. So when push came to shove, John got it done.
Amazing how good he was. He was a crackerjack player.
John just dominated the game. He just controlled the game. He did it with his arm. He did it with his legs.
And in the pantheon of all-time greats, there was only one Pat Screen.
Who, the golden boy, Pat Screen.
You just would go, wow.
Pat was a heck of an athlete. There wasn't no two ways about it. He's the best I've ever played with.
Pat played baseball, track, basketball, football, and he was captain of all four teams, and deservedly so, and was a 4.0 student.
Pat Screen was kind of a hero, I think, of everybody, anybody who played athletics in New Orleans.
The defining moment of Screen's outstanding high school career was the 1960 state championship.
He scored every point in the state championship game against LaGrange, okay, 21-20. He made every touchdown, he made every extra point.
The Screen-led Blue Jays would not be denied the Catholic League's first state crown.
It's all business, no playing around or anything else. And we were there to win. And we lost the year before and everything else, and we wanted to win.
It would not be the league's only crown. There was Otis Washington's 1975 St. Aug team.
1975 was a team that had very few weaknesses.
Well, the 75 team was just animals.
The Purple Knights became the only team in Catholic League history to go 15-0. To this day, that stands as a league record.
You know those years where you just kind of know that nobody's going to beat this team, where you know this team is going to win. And that's the kind of team that 1975 team was.
That 15-0 football team was the best high school football team I've ever laid my eyes on.
The Purple Knights claimed their first state championship as a member of the LHSAA and the Catholic League.
You know, this was the first time that an African-American school, a mostly African-American school, won a state title in the LHSAA. It was a big deal, and they did it with class, and they did it really with dominance.
Catholic League dominance was evident the two other times that the district won custody of the crown before 1978. In both 1963 and 1971, Louisiana's best would be decided in a battle between the best of the Catholic League. With Washington on one sideline and Coach Bobby Conlon on the other, St. Aug and Brother Martin took the state spotlight in 1971.
Coach Conlon, Coach Washington, you know, two legends of the game hooking up, names on both sides of the ball all over the place. Defensive battles.
Two New Orleans teams playing in the state championship game, which you know, doesn't happen a lot.
The biggest thing I remember is walking out of the tunnel that night and seeing all the purple and gold on one side of the stadium and all the crimson and gold on the other side of the stadium. And Tad Gormley was packed.
25,000 filled the horseshoe and witnessed Brother Martin raise the state championship trophy for the first time. The Gentilly rivalry between the Crusaders and the Purple Knights was not only defined in 1971, it was immortalized.
I think 71 was a year where that rivalry really developed.
I think out of that game came the rivalry between St. Aug and Brother Martin. It was born.
I'm always amazed that, you know, I'll still run into people and they'll bring up that game. You know, it's still something that they talk about.
Fans have been talking about the Holy Cross Jesuit rivalry since 1922.
Jesuit Holy Cross, when you mention that, that's special.
In 1963, the LHSAA first allowed a second team from each district into the playoffs, and that year, Holy Cross and Jesuit were the last two teams standing.
Not only did the finals mark the first time two teams from the same city in Louisiana had ever met for a state championship, but it validated the locals' belief that the Catholic League was now the epitome of high school football in Louisiana.
If a Crescent City collision for the '63 crown wasn't drama enough, the head coaches, the Blue Jays' Ken Tarzetti and the Tigers' John Kalbacher, were brothers-in-law. It was a family feud for the finals.
It was very intense. Kalbacher wanted to win, Tarzetti wanted to win.
Those two guys thought it was Kalbacher versus Tarzetti.
We all understood what it meant to him and family and all like that.
He let us know how important it was.
Because Mondays weren't real good if you lost to Holy Cross.
I don't even think the wives even spoke to one another that week at all.
The 1963 team was Kalbacher's finest.
They just had talent from one end to the other. I can remember in my senior year, I had made All-State, and they had, maybe 3, 4, 5 guys that made All-State. And that's how much talent they had.
We had tremendous defense. Vic Umont was a great defensive football player.
Wilson and Umont were bookend linebackers on defense and eventually coached with and against each other.
27,000 filled Tulane Stadium on a Tuesday to watch Holy Cross defeat Jesuit and win their first state crown since 1945 and first as a member of the Catholic League.
Jesuit was good, but they wasn't like Holy Cross. Holy Cross was tremendous talent.
It would take Jesuit another 15 years before they would return to the state championship game. And once again, they would find a Catholic League rival on the opposing sideline in a game that would change high school football forever. It was 1978, and the world was captured by Space Invaders, one of the most influential video games ever. In New Orleans, a high school football game was going to capture the city's imagination and invade a space usually reserved for professionals and champions. It was a game that would consecrate the 70s as the decade of the Catholic League dominance.
The 70s, to me, was the brightest time of the Catholic League.
That league at the time was perhaps one of the best leagues in the country.
The league was excellent, and they knew it was excellent.
During that time, the Catholic League was the epitome of football. You know, everyone wanted to be in the Catholic League and they wanted to beat the teams that were in the Catholic League.
Every school in the league was a rivalry at that time. I mean, everyone was good.
You play Roma, next week you got St. Aug, next week you got Brother Martin, next week you got Jesuit, so it was never a cakewalk.
They really made no bones about it that they thought they were the best district, not just in this area, but in the state of Louisiana, and perhaps they probably were.
The only question about their supremacy was the perceived shortage of state crowns since the inception of the league.
To play for a state championship, I never said win the state championship. To play for a state championship, you got to sweat blood. You got to, you got to have a lot of luck.
You know, they felt like the reason why they didn't win as many titles was that we beat up on each other so much.
Playing in the Catholic League week in and week out, one, it'll make you a better player. Two, it gets you hurt too.
We always knew we played in the toughest league in the state. And we know by playing in the toughest league in the state that if we could win the Catholic League, that was the victory we really wanted.
The prize we wanted and we played for was the Catholic Championship. That was the jewel.
We played every game to win the Catholic League. It really wasn't about winning the state championship. It was about winning the Catholic League.
I mean, when you won that league, you know you went through a wall.
In 1978, it looked like the league's 100-yard war would continue.
Every week was a dogfight for everyone.
There was not any team on the schedule that you could overlook.
You know, you can go right down the list: Chalmette, De La Salle, Brother Martin, Romo, all of us were good at that time.
All the teams in the league that year were good. 5 of the teams could have been playing for the state championship.
St. Aug, everyone wanted to be because they were the power. They were one of the powers at that time with Coach Washington and his staff, you know, had been together for a long time there.
That year, the Purple Knights got a scare from Chalmette High. The 1978 Bill Cimento-coached Owls were led by quarterback Vince Manala and had their sights on a Catholic League coronation.
And Chalmette was a well-run, a well-organized, disciplined school.
We had to really struggle to beat Chalmette, and they had a chance to beat St. Aug.
We played the last game of the season at Chalmette Stadium against St. Aug. We were in first place. A victory meant we would become the Catholic League champions.
In front of still a school record crowd of over 14,000 in St. Bernard Parish, the Owls mounted a comeback.
We scored 2 quick touchdowns near the end of the game on passes to Mike Burns, and then we have a chance to win the game. The decision is to go for the 2-point conversion to win the game. Bill Cimento calls a rollout for Vince Manala and stopped a few inches from the goal line, and unfortunately we have one of the great losses in Chalmette history, and we go from being first place to third place and no playoff.
The Owls' heartbreak left 2 teams standing, St. Augustine and Jesuit. 2 teams that had taken divergent paths in the 70s. By the start of the 78 season, the Purple Knights had won a share of the Catholic League crown 5 times, made it to the state finals twice, and won it all once.
People think that St. Aug, that they have all of these, NFL type and blue chip type football players every year. And they don't, and they didn't, okay? Yeah, they had some really talented football players that came through there. So did a lot of other schools.
What the other schools didn't have was Otis Washington.
Coach Washington had what I feel is a personality and an ability that one knew he was going to get the best out of his players.
He was very tough. He was someone who garnered respect, a lot of respect.
He was real tough. He was very disciplined, on time. He had to do this, boom, boom, boom. It was a regimen, and he did it for a reason. He did it for a reason. He knew what our kids needed, and those are the things that he did for us.
Extremely well disciplined, didn't do stupid things, didn't have kind of crazy penalties.
I think his discipline, his stressing fundamentals, the emphasis on preparation and film study were Otis's hallmarks, and I think those served him really well for all of those years he was the head coach at St. Aug.
By St. Aug standards, in 1978, Washington and his staff had to do more with less.
They had two blue chippers, serious blue chippers on the 78 team. Darryl Sanjay, who went to Oklahoma, Malcolm Scott, who went to LSU. And outside of that, it was good high school football players.
Good high school players that were bound for glory in 78 and 79.
I think one of the keys to those 2 years was Darren Dixon at quarterback, did a great job for us managing the offense.
What he was a guy who won a whole lot.
Had a fantastic arm, and he was smart. He had football, he was football savvy.
He was a guy who played a lot of football, started a lot of games, was a very experienced and a very smart football player.
He could read defenses, and he could motivate the guys around him. The players respected him.
He was somebody who I think that Otis Washington trusted.
He just executed. He executed whatever play Coach Burns or Coach Washington drew up. He executed that play.
He was like that team. I think he kind of he was a personification of that team. A team that was talented enough, but got the job done, did what they had to do when they had to do it to win.
I don't think those were his greatest teams athletically and as far as talent, but he always said that both of those teams went the extra yard, but he did have great players. You didn't win the Catholic League championship every year or tie it unless you were loaded, because everybody in that district was good.
I thought 78, they were so good. I'm gonna tell you, I'm the head coach at Holy Cross in 1978. They could have beat us, they could have named whatever score they wanted, they were that good. I remember on the first play, they ran a sweep to my bench, and Malcolm Scott blocked our defensive end off the field. Not down the field, off the field, okay? Over the benches, on the track. And that's when I knew we were really in trouble. I mean, we're gonna have a long night.
On the other path, it had been a long decade for the once dominant Blue Jays. Not since 1970, when Jesuit was a part of a three-way tie with Holy Cross and St. Aug, did the Catholic League crown reside on Bank Street. In 1975, the school looked to a coach from Alabama.
I was head coach at St. Stanislaus for 6 years. Then I came to Jesuit as an assistant under Ray Coates. I left there and went to work with John Callback at Holy Cross for 4 years.
Billy came in when the school was down. We had won 2 games in 2 years.
They asked me if I could turn it around. I told them it would take 4 to 5 years if it could be done. If it couldn't be done, then they wouldn't have to fire me. I wouldn't stay around.
Billy Murphy, really good guy, and a really good coach.
Coach Billy Murphy was, and still is, like a second father to me.
The man now in charge of the Blue Jays program seemed to be cut from the same cloth as other Catholic League coaches like Otis Washington.
Billy Murphy was the same way. There were no nonsense guys, but you always saw that little tinge of heart that they probably didn't always want people to see, but it was there. It was there for you to see.
He was as honest as you could be. If you messed up, he was on you. If you did good things, he praised you.
He'd either pick me up after a loss or pat me on the back after a win, and just a little bit of, I guess, old country advice that goes such a long way in a kid's mind like mine and puts things into perspective. He is absolutely a great man.
I mean, I can tell you right now, Billy Murphy put his shoe up my butt a lot of times, and I think I've turned out decent.
Murphy and his staff faced a monumental challenge to restore Jesuit to glory.
We were the patsies of the league early on, and the old Blue Jays ain't what they used to be. We heard that. We heard all the nasty songs.
Coach Murphy and his staff really dedicated themselves to making us a better team.
We are rebuilding. We're committed to rebuilding. We're going to find a way to win. And it did not have to be spoken. You could feel it, you could sense it.
We were here in the mornings working out with the weights. I mean, I think it was one of the first groups who really got involved with the weightlifting part of it, the discipline part of it, everyone showing up and buying into what they were selling.
He and his staff instilled in us the work ethic and the confidence to know that we could not only compete but be victorious.
And that's a big thing with any coach. If you buy into what the coach is selling, you're going to have some success. And I think everyone bought into it.
No one bought into Murphy's message as much as Lenny Quick did.
It was understood and believed that Jesuit High School, at the time I entered it, was down, but yet in the upward direction. And that had a lot to do with my decision, which was a very difficult one, in not attending the tradition of the Quick family and going to Holy Cross.
Lenny Quick, all his brothers went to Holy Cross. Well, he lived right by me, and we couldn't quote unquote recruit, but I told Lenny, I said, Lenny, you ought to come to Jesuit, never thinking he would.
I had 3 older brothers that all attended and were star athletes at Holy Cross High School. My oldest, Henry, graduated in '66. He played on the '63 state championship team. My brother Ronnie played for a state championship on the 1967 team. My brother Kenny went to school at Holy Cross and played and graduated in 1975.
On the first day of school, Coach Murphy would dispel any of the younger Quick's doubts.
And when I got into his vehicle, I said, "Good morning, Coach Murphy." And he turned and he looked at me and he says, "Boy, let me tell you something. When you're a senior, we will be there." And I knew instantly what he meant, and that means we would be in the state championship game my senior year in 1978.
At first, Murphy's prophecy seemed flawed.
First 2 years we got beat up pretty bad. Had played a lot of sophomores in a tough Catholic league.
By the end of year 3, the Blue Jays had only won 8 games. Coach Murphy was sent to the principal's office.
So Father Thompson called me in and said, "We're not doing too good." I said, "Well, I told you it would take 4 to 5 years. He said, "Well, I'm getting some pressure." I said, "Well, I told you wouldn't have to fire me." So anyway, make a long story short, he said, "Can you take the pressure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." Next year, we played for the state championship. So we turned it around in 4 years.
That was a good team, a really good team. They really were. Only game that they lost during the regular season was to St. Aug, 28-7. And in those days, a 28-7 victory, that was a lopsided victory. Okay, I can remember being a little surprised that they beat them by 21.
We didn't expect it. We thought it was going to be a fight. We thought it was going to be a fight, 20-21 game, something like that, 7-14 game.
It wasn't just a few breaks here or there that didn't go our way. We were beat by a very good Otis Washington coached team.
And they beat us pretty good, pretty soundly in that ball game. But after the game, you could get the feeling that, we thought we had a chance.
It was a tremendous learning experience. What it taught us was that our chances of getting to where we are going to go or want to go and be in the state championship game in 1978 required whatever it took from that point on.
But we came back and got to the drawing board and went right after them.
I think it was a blessing in disguise, and we took that and we had an even stronger desire and commitment to do whatever it took.
So there was no doubt, that St. Aug was the best team. However, we go on to get to the end, and you're not so sure now because, these two teams, they both have one loss. St. Aug lost to Rummel.
Jesuit wasn't as good early as they were late on because they really came on strong with the quarterback Perriton. And Perriton was as good at running the wishbone as anybody.
In those days, when you got beat in district, you had 2 teams only going to the playoffs, and the only way you could make to play that team again was get to the final game. And that was a motivation for us to get to the final game.
2 teams whose journey through the 70s had been so dramatically different were on the same path if they could both run the 4-week gauntlet to the state playoffs. For Jesuit, another New Orleans team stood in the Blue Jays' way.
One of the best games I've ever seen at Tulane Stadium, the Carver Jesuit game, playoff game of that year. That was a really good Carver team. I mean, really good. And they beat them in the playoffs.
We'd methodically drive down and score, they'd make the big play.
They ran a pretty wild offense in those days. They had a couple wide receivers they liked to throw the bomb to all the time. But, you know, we found a way to win. And that's the bottom line. You got to find a way to win.
And St. Aug, as I remember, went to Lafayette, and Lafayette was #1 in the state. And in that semifinal, they went to Lafayette and shut them out, I think 30-0, if I'm not mistaken. So it's all set.
At that time that we beat Carver, there was a good probability if we could be successful the following week that we'd maybe in a state championship playing St. Augustine again.
Each playoff game, you wanted to play that game because you knew the only way you could get back at the team that beat you was to get to the finals. And we did have a little mark ready to get back to the final game.
I was scared to death going into that football game because Jesuit, playing them in the state playoff, we know that they would have an extra incentive to try to beat us because, you know, we played them, we beat them pretty good early in the year.
There was no doubting whether we could not only compete but beat St. Aug.
First thing the coach is saying, you know, these guys, we played them early in the season. We beat them pretty good. They're going to be ready for us.
Big St. Aug against little Jesuit, and here we go.
Once again, Louisiana's best would be determined in a battle between the best of the Catholic League.
My grandfather, as far as I know, went to 1 high school football game in his entire life. He went to that game, the St. Aug Jesuit game, on December 15, 1978.
It was a big deal, and it was talked about. You know, this is the first one since the 60s. And that's the one thing I think a lot of people like to see. 2 New Orleans teams in the final. They want, the pride of the city.
This was a big deal, I think, because it was 2 Catholic League teams. It was 2 schools that had, butted heads before as rivals, during the short 9-10 years that St. Aug had been in the Catholic League. Both teams were terrific teams, 2 of the better teams in the history of both of these schools. And all the ingredients were there. All the ingredients were there for something special. And I think it was something special.
An additional ingredient was needed to make it super.
Everybody knows Friday night that they're going to play, but I got people calling me at the station. When are they going to play in the dome? Well, I don't know, And eventually by that Monday or Tuesday, yeah, they knew that they were going to play in the dome.
At least at the time, under that format in the dome, that was the largest crowd, both indoor or outdoor, in the state of Louisiana high school football, of some official number in the 42,000, 43,000 range.
It was somewhere, I would say, between 45, maybe 55,000.
They'll tell you 40,000, but I'm willing to bet there was at least 60,000 people in that stadium that night.
It was pretty much overwhelming at first, and then it was inspirational.
In the Superdome that night, there was never a moment of silence. There was always a roar. It was just electrifying.
I looked around. That's when the butterflies kicked in. That's when the nervousness started coming on. And Mr. Walsh came and said, Dixon, you're not playing in the stands, so you're playing on the football field.
On the football field, the turf of the Louisiana Superdome became a battlefield, and the ferocity of the fight was obvious from Jesuit's first play from scrimmage.
Dyrus Charles was my little running back. In the first play of the game, he got busted. I mean, the whole place went crazy. I told Dyrus before the game, I said, Dyrus, you're either going to be a hero or we're going to have to bring a respirator to you. He got cold-cocked, I mean.
It was brutal. It was just, you know, one of those Catholic League battles.
Every hit was a train wreck. And it felt like both trains, you and your opponent, were each doing about 150 miles per hour.
One time they hit Parrington, and I was like, oh my God, you know, is he gonna get up? And he got up, and he kept getting up.
Both were out for blood, and it was a tremendous battle. Except for 3 big plays in that game, that's what it was. It was a grueling, grueling matchup in the trenches.
The first big play came when the Purple Knights called the coach's name.
It used to be Trap 23 Pass. We named it after one of our coaches, Burns Special. And we had the option to run a curl, and we ran the curl a number of times. Then we came back because they started biting on the curve. We ran the post corner. Because the receiver came back and said, Dixon, we got to change the route because they're jumping on it.
Wisely in this moment, Dixon listened to Gregory Hobbs and not himself.
I step up. I'm thinking now, I'm not a runner. I'm thinking I should run the ball, but the guy breaks open, Hobbs breaks open, lob the ball up, and he catches it for the first touchdown.
Darren Dixon's pass completed on the play.
St. Aug didn't do a whole lot offensively against Jesuit. They really didn't. And vice versa. Jesuit didn't do a whole lot against St. Aug. Both of those defenses were outstanding.
To counter the Purple Knights defense, Jesuit dialed up a counter play in the 3rd quarter.
Yeah, it was a counter play. We faked Lenny, the fullback, one way and counter back the other way.
Myself and Darius Charles went left as if it were going to be a triple option to the left. Timmy Parrington came out as the quarterback to the left as if it were going to be a triple option. Lon McCloskey took that one counter step to the left and then straight back up the 2-hole.
75, 76 yards right up the middle.
Lon McCloskey breaking that long touchdown run, which I felt was our springboard and put us back in the game, and we were on a good path to victory.
The reaction on the opposite sideline from Coach Wash was not what the junior quarterback expected.
Never fazed him. Never fazed him. And he said, all right, let's go. Kickoff return. And everybody was like, but he never got excited. He was always calm. And we come back and we just continue to play the way that we played.
That meant Dixon finding Hobbs again.
It was either second or third play from scrimmage by St. Aug into the 4th quarter when they scored, and then, of course, missed the extra point.
We're thinking it's going to come back and haunt us, especially once they get that ball down inside our territory, inside the 40.
I was sure that we were just going to come back and punch it in, kick the extra point, and win that game 14-13.
Jesuit would have its chances to bring back the crowd to Bank Street.
We had a chance to win the ball game.
We all knew it was a sense of urgency, but we've been in that position before. We've been in that against the Brother Martins. We've been in that position against the Rummels.
Lenny Quick, the ball carrier.
And we fumbled the ball and turned it back over. I remember feeling like the wind just been knocked out of me, only momentarily, but we took a step back. So it was one more hurdle that we had to overcome to get the ball back and utilize the time as efficiently as we could that we had left whenever we got the ball back.
With one misstep, destiny seemed to be with the team of the decade. But Jesuit was not done battling destiny or St. Aug.
And we thought that we had iced the game when we had Jesuit pinned up around the 10-yard line.
Timmy Parrington came out, and it was a gutsy call by Coach Murphy, but Timmy came out, threw a great ball to Bobby Lewis. Bobby Lewis ran a great route, made a catch, got us out of that hole all the way down to, I believe, our 45-yard line. So that was it. We figured, here we go, we're on the roll.
And we knew the game was on because if they score and convert it, they win. But we stopped them and then ran the clock out.
You know, I did not want to believe or see it come to the realization of those last few seconds winding down, knowing that we would not get the ball back and another opportunity to score and win that game.
Darren Dixon, the ball carrier.
I just tasted and wanted the victory so bad, as did the rest of my teammates and the staff and the administration. Well, I just wanted that taste of victory.
In the end, you know, St. Aug got their glory, but I think it'll go down as one of the better games played in the state championship in a setting that, you know, I don't think no one's ever topped.
I always can tell when I'm at a sporting event and I'm covering an event where I know that this is going to change things in some way, shape, and form. And I knew that that game was going to change high school sports in some way.
It was probably one of the watershed games in the history of the Louisiana High School Athletic Association.
Not only did the game blaze a path to the Superdome for future Louisiana championships, it changed high school football around the country.
I think it had a lot to do with moving all of the state championship games to the Superdome.
That's when the Superdome Classic actually began.
It was a big defining moment for LHSAA football.
I think you have to point to that for the impact that it had on Louisiana high school football. Without that game, there is no prep classic.
You saw that it could work. You could make it something for teams across the state to point toward, to get to the dome, to get to the building that was called the eighth wonder of the world at the time, to get to play in the building where Super Bowls and Sugar Bowls have been held and where the Saints play.
So the 78 game that St. Aug won 13-7 was probably one of the most important games in the history of football.
In time, the game may have changed football, but the impact on each Jesuit player and coach was immediate and intense.
The whole culmination of what they had been through, and all the kids from the 75, 76 who got their brains beat out, you know, I thought about them because all of them were also part of this.
To be fortunate enough to be a part of the Catholic League and Jesuit High School and playing another Catholic League school and a great competitor in St. Augustine for the state championship, rightfully so in a setting in the city of New Orleans in the magnificent Superdome in front of a tremendous record-breaking crowd.
I said, there were 2 state champions tonight. I told them how proud I was of them and to hold their heads up and be proud because there were no losers in 1978. The score-wise, we lost, but I didn't consider it a loss, you know. They were winners just like St. Aug was.
The championship trophy went to AP Toro Avenue, but the pride had returned to Bank Street. Billy Murphy and his staff had kept more than their promise.
They really believed in you, they fought with you, and you fought for them. And that's the one thing I'll take forever is those 4 guys who really taught me how to be a man and stand up and do certain things.
How proud I was of my team and how much I loved that bunch of kids and everything, you know. So I just remember all the good things. I'll never forget this bunch.
Thinking about my teammates, our coaching staff, Jesuit High School, everything that embodied what that institution stands for.
In 1979, the album Off the Wall foretold of Michael Jackson's rise to the top as the king of pop. It was also the year that the dynasty on AP Toro would see its king abdicate his throne. As St. Aug celebrated its 1978 state crown in the Superdome, Quarterback Darren Dixon was surprised by head coach Otis Washington's reaction to their victory.
He didn't really express himself that night. I think his mind was on the next season.
From year to year, he was, he was building. He was getting ready for the next year.
The next year, 1979, would require all of Washington's staff's talent to get where St. Aug wanted to go.
That team in '79 was not the best talented team. I think we had a lot of hard workers, a lot of determined kids.
There weren't a lot of, 4-star, 5-star recruits or whatever you want to call it. There were a lot of good high school football players who were well coached and who were accustomed to being in a culture of winning. We felt like, we're St. Aug, we're supposed to win. And I think that had a lot to do with why they won.
And when they did, defeating New Iberia 16-7 for the state crown by capturing back-to-back titles in '78 and '79, the Purple Knights became the first Class 4A team in history to win consecutive titles.
I'm not sure that there has been any 10-year span by a coach in the Catholic League that was quite as good as the Otis Washington years.
And this was a domination of the 70s.
You go back to those great teams of the 70s when they won 3 in 5 years, really an unprecedented run in terms of what we've seen over the last 4 decades. And I'm not sure we will see anything like that.
In a league like that where there's so much parity, they were dominant when you look back at it. I mean, they were dominant to win 3 state titles.
We felt after '79, we felt for sure in 1980 because we would have been better.
There are no sure things in the Catholic League.
In '79, I left to go to LSU. When Bo Ryan became head coach, he came in to talk to me about becoming the first black coach that LSU would hire, and that he needed a person who could recruit New Orleans, and had to really convince me. And I tried to convince my wife, and I don't think she's ever been convinced. She's never convinced to the date. But I thought it was the right decision at the time.
The administration now faced their own decision.
When Otis stepped down, the biggest thing that they did, the biggest mistake that St. Augustine did, was not give the job to someone on the staff at the time.
Just about everybody on that staff had a St. Aug connection. They either played there, or Coach Flint coached there, and the rest of the guys, like Burton Burns and Gilbert Bennett and Greg Pulley and these people, they all played for Otis.
If we were a losing staff, I can see you going outside the program and bring somebody in. But we are a winning staff, and all you do is keep the same staff and process. And we could have won state champion maybe 80 and 81 because we had some good kids coming in.
Had we stayed together as a staff, there was no limit to how many games we would have won. How many state championships we would have won.
It was like, well, we don't want to continue. You don't want to continue what? Winning state championships in '75, '78, '79? All those guys played a part in that.
Take any one of those guys, and there's your successor. But they chose to go outside, and they selected, a guy named Jay Cunningham, who had some NFL playing experience and was a coach at the University of Louisville, I think. And it didn't quite work out. We're New Orleans, we're kind of provincial.
It wasn't until after 2 more coaches that then they turned to Tony Villegas. Okay, who was on the Otis staff?
I think Father Verrett and Father O'Rourke were the 2 guys who had been part of the old St. Aug days, and I think that they felt like they wanted to bring back the tradition of St. Aug.
To return to glory in '86, Villegas' first move was to bring in another Purple Knight, Burton Burns, as co-head coach. The move showed Villegas knew what he was doing.
Here's a guy who was, an all Ivy League player at Princeton. And of course, you know, Burton Burns went on to the University of Nebraska, and of course we know what he's doing now. He's the assistant head coach at the University of Alabama. So, you know, these are guys who are really good coaches, had some very, very good teams, and I think got St. Aug back to where St. Aug was, where they expect to be.
Just a year later, Villegas led St. Aug to its first of 4 Catholic League championships under his guidance.
I had some really good teams. You know, the '87 team sticks out offensively. We had some great offensive guys on that team. That was the team with Tyrone Hughes, played so great for us. And we also had on that same team Lewis Age. We had 3 guys off of that team that ended up in the NFL. That was Lewis Age, Tyrone Hughes, and David White.
Tony brings some resemblance of the old St. Aug program back, but guess what? He couldn't recreate what Otis had.
So if you are the coach at St. Aug, you are measured by a guy who, as I said, lost about 17 games in 11 seasons and won 3 state titles. Yeah, that's difficult to live up to.
You got to have a thick skin to coach at St. Aug, because I think what they're looking for, they're never ever going to find, which is somebody to repeat the success Otis had. So it's definitely something that you got to just kind of not pay attention to. And I did. I was pretty successful at not paying attention to it.
If you look at the records, you know, he's the winningest coach in St. Aug history. Tony Villegas, yes. You know, and he just had never won a state championship. And he's probably put more kids in the NFL than any other coach.
I thought that Tony Villegas had a tremendous, tremendous run as a head coach at St. Aug. And maybe because he didn't win any state titles, maybe that's why he's not appreciated as much.
Tony won more football games than I did. Won more football games than anybody's ever coached at St. Aug. He had better football players. He really had some great football players. And the one thing he didn't do was to win a state championship. He got to the semifinals 4 times, 3 or 4 times. You know, just 1 game away.
To win a state championship, you got to have a good football team. The ball's got to bounce your way somewhat. You got to get some calls to go your way. Got to have a little bit of luck, you know. And I know that because I tried hard to win one for a long time and never quite got there.
You've got to be lucky as well as good. He was good, but it wasn't quite as lucky as I was.
In the end, it was St. Aug that was lucky.
So the 7th Ward, City of New Orleans, 9th Ward, you know, St. Aug football was a real life for them, and they want to see it successful. And Otis Washington started all that.
But in all that competition of the Catholic League, I can't come up with one coach who had anything bad to say about the coach who, on a regular basis, kicked their butts.
He gave that school an identity in the Catholic League. He is the reason why St. Augustine was St. Augustine.
It's part of the Catholic League's legacy, is what Otis Washington accomplished through the 70s. I mean, that's part of what makes the Catholic League the league it is.
The league is defined by the character of men who, like Otis Washington, did more than coach the game.
There's no doubt that Otis Washington had just as much an effect on his players off the field as he did on the field.
Football at St. Aug has done for a lot of people is giving them the identity and the discipline to go out here and no matter what obstacle they face, persevere.
I think more than anything, he was more of a father to the players.
His thing was molding young men, African-American men, so that they can be productive in no matter what endeavor they might go into.
That's what this stuff is supposed to be about, you know, as opposed to X's and O's. It's how these people are, what kind of people you produce. And Otis Washington was the kind of guy who has produced quality people, and I think it's largely because he's such a quality person.
St. Aug will always be #1 in my heart.
From 1971 to 1989, TV cartoons went from the Jackson 5 to the Simpsons. It was also the time between championship game appearances by Brother Martin. But between that time, there was glory exemplified.
Bobby Conlon, the winningest coach in Louisiana's highest classification in prep history. I know that has to make you feel like a very, very proud man.
Well, not really. It just makes you feel old. You win that many games, you got to coach a long time.
And there have been these iconic coaches throughout the Catholic League history that are easy to point to, the ones that were there for long periods of time. And the reason they were there for long periods of time was because they were that good.
Bobby Conlon became the head coach of Brother Martin in 1970, and as the decades progressed, Conlon became the league's unifying constant along its ever-changing sideline.
There is no Catholic League for me without Bobby Conlon and Chubby Marks. They define for me my Catholic League experience of Brother Martin.
Bobby, more than anything else, was true to who he was, both as a person and as a coach. You always knew what you were going to get.
A unique New Orleans character, a great football coach.
What a fun guy to be around, you know, but the guy was smart. He knew what was going on, and he knew football.
He was a quintessential looking football coach. You know, I mean, he just looked like a football coach.
Always had a cigarette in his hand, but man, he was a nice man.
He was friends with everyone.
I never heard him say anything that didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Bobby was down to earth. Their football teams were hard-nosed. They played good defense.
Smash mouth, hard-nosed, physical. It's a testosterone test.
Whatever the outcome of the game, they're going to know that they played Brother Martin High School, physically.
We ran the wishbone, and it was straight ahead, hit you right in the mouth kind of stuff.
Bobby ran the football. He didn't believe in really throwing it much at all, if ever. And Bobby trusted Chubby Marks to run his defense, who did a fantastic job over an elongated period of time.
For me, Conlon and Marks were interchangeable. Marks was defensive coordinator, but Bobby was head coach. But they were two mirror images of each other. And there's a reason why they did so well together.
When you think about that combination, you understand why they were so successful over so many years. They had other really good coaches over there. Al Pontiff comes to mind, who was an excellent coach.
Bobby let coaches coach, and I think that was one of the secrets, you know.
Coach Pontiff, my offense coordinator, Brother Martin, he is the best coach, and I'm not just saying Catholic League, best coach not to be a head coach.
For 26 years, the Crusaders spoke with one voice, the gruff voice of Bobby Conlon, a result of accidentally swallowing rat poison as a kid, and contradicted his true nature.
To the point now where we're making less mistakes, and I just hope tonight we can keep it up.
Was like a Marine sergeant. He had this bellowing voice. You could hear him across the football field.
He could stop you from 50 yards away just with the sound of his voice.
You're going to have to do whatever it is you have to do, and you better do it.
You know, a lot of people said he was tough and he was mean and all, but Coach Conlon had a very, very soft heart.
When we won and we were successful, there was nobody more excited for us than Coach Conlon, because he understood, as the old ABC wide world of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. You know, Bobby Conlon experienced them both.
That was the genius of Coach Conlon, where he would not let us get too high. It was always, you know, you can be in the penthouse one day and the outhouse the next day.
You wouldn't think of him being a motivator kind of guy, but he had a ritual every year where he'd put a little tear in his shirt and he'd get out on the field, and at the right time of practice, he would tear his shirt off and be bare-chested like the Hulk.
The lunacy of that act was balanced by the conversations I would have and we would have with him, where before the game, we would look into the mirror. And he would ask each of us, is the man in the mirror ready to play? And so I think of the man who would always go nuts to try and motivate the team. But I remember him asking me at every turn, was I ready to pay the price to be great? And he wasn't just talking about football. And so I think about Bob Conlon beyond his victories in football. He remains for me a teacher of men.
Conlon could be at his best as a teacher of men when victory vanished, like in 1985. Heading to play for Notre Dame, Rod West was a senior on that team.
Today, because we lost to St. Martinville in the state semifinals.
In defeat, a true measure of a man can be taken.
When they lost at St. Martinville, when he had Ward Manuel and Rod West, who were two of the greatest players in the history of the school, and he got beat 13-7, and they dropped the touchdown pass and fumbled on the 1-yard line, and everything in the world went wrong with him, and they would have played Everett the next week. But he cried after that game.
And here's my coach, the man I admired and in some instances feared as a father figure, was crying. And it dawned on me that it meant as much to him as it did to us.
A measure of a man at his lowest point still raises others up.
I said, Bob, man, I'm sorry, bad call. He said, how many good calls you made, all the years that you were here, and particularly this year. He said, don't let that bother you. And that's the kind of guy he was.
In 1989, Collins Crusaders returned to the championship game for the first time since 1971.
Brother Martin got to the Dome that year, and I called it the Magical Mystery Tour because they weren't expected to be there.
Well, at the start of the year, we wasn't predicted to do anything, really. We lost just about everybody on defense. We had 11 starters on offense that were seniors, so we were confident.
Bobby Conlon knew that with a Chad LaRose, he could do a lot of things.
He's an excellent football player. He's got a lot of quickness, a lot of speed, and he can do a lot of things for you.
Chad changed the complexity of games because he could run the football, throw the football. He was a great athlete.
Chad was capable of being a good runner, a good passer.
Chad couldn't throw the ball from here to the middle of the hallway, but he was a quarterback who was such a skilled athlete and such a good runner to run Bobby's offense that he earned a scholarship to UCLA.
If I threw the ball 5-6 times a game, that was a lot.
LaRose didn't have to throw. For the first time in Louisiana history, there were 3 1,000-yard rushers in one backfield.
Myself, I was at quarterback. Pat Stack, he wound up being a 1,000-yard rusher at fullback, and then Jason Wilson, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. So the one that gets left out that you don't hear a lot about is Jimmy Lalonde. He was our a blocking back, and all of us would say if it wasn't for Jimmy Lalonde being a lead blocker, none of us would have had 1,000 yards.
Those yards gained gave Brother Martin a chance to avenge the semifinal overtime loss to Ruston a year before. A trip to the Superdome was on the line.
And in the semifinals, I went up north to play Ruston, and they played one of the epic games in high school football history.
It was exactly opposite of the game from 1988, where it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust. This was a track meet.
And they won the game, overtime, 59-56. It was what you call not only an incredible game, but a sellout performance. They left every ounce of energy and emotion on the field, and I think that kind of affected them the next week when they played a far superior, bigger, faster team in the Superdome and lost in that championship game.
I'm biased because I played in it, but I think for a team that was supposed to be 4th or 5th in the district to go to the semifinals and win that way, I think is a tribute to the coaches and the players on that team.
That would be Conlon's final trip to the finals. 1996 would mark his last season at the helm of the football program at Elysian Fields.
It had gotten to a point, I guess, that they had decided that Coach Conlon was going to step down and just teach. And then we, then found out that Coach Conlon was sick.
Well, it's Bob. He loved to have a good time, I think he burned both ends of the candles at the same time.
I used to always tell him, man, I wish you'd quit smoking. And the cigarettes eventually killed him early.
It's almost like you look back that he lived to coach football. That's what he did. He lived to coach football, and when his coaching was over with, I don't know what he would have done.
He lived his life the way he wanted. He had a full life.
The legacy of Bobby Conlon extends past the Gentilly campus of Brother Martin. His legacy defines glory in the Catholic League of New Orleans.
Much like all the great coaches, they were first and foremost teachers of men, and those young men, their toughest jobs as our coaches was to force us to do things that at that age we were naturally not inclined to do, to put us in a position to achieve the goals they knew we would want to achieve.
He will always be known here at Brother Martin High School as our football coach, our first football coach that taught us our tradition. Still today, we refer back to Coach Conlon and in things that he instilled in all of us.
Without Coach Conlon, Brother Martin is a high school in New Orleans. With Coach Conlon, it was a lifetime experience that I'll never forget.
More so than football, he coached character, about doing the right thing, about doing the best at the right thing. And to me, that was more important to him than anything else, was coaching character.
It was their example, the lessons that we learned from them, the example that they set for others to follow, that was bigger than the actual person.
I can attribute everything I've done throughout my life, 46 years old now, back to those days when I was 15, 16, 17, 18.
He treated those young men, regardless of what color they were, regardless of their background, socioeconomically, racially, or otherwise, he treated them as his sons. And as a result, he lived and died with all of our successes and failures personally, not just in athletics. And I love him for it. I love him for it. And his legacy will be the generations, plural, of young men who, but for the intervention of Bob Conlon through the charism of the Brothers of the Sacred Heart, who taught young men how to be men.
In 1983, the series Family Ties was developing into a television hit, captivating audiences with a new generation gap. It was also the year that Shaw introduced its new head football coach, a coach who would develop new family ties and forever change the Catholic League of New Orleans. Since 1969, Joe Zimmerman had led the Archbishop Shaw football program.
Joe Zimmerman gave Archbishop Shaw an identity. I thought they became a factor in the Catholic League.
I think this was the first time that Shaw was really, a tangible force.
But as generational change swept through the league's sidelines, Zimmerman made a move uptown to De La Salle High School. That left a young assistant by the name of Hank Tierney looking for advancement.
I know when I left, I was thinking maybe I'd get him to come to De La Salle, but I remember him telling me, look, I'm going to try to get the Shaw job.
The program was winning when Joe left. It just won a district championship and had just played for another. So the thought was there were going to be a lot of high-profile head coaches apply, which I actually believed I wasn't going to get the job. I thought they were going to say, hey, well, it's been nice, but they gave him the job the same day that Joe resigned. Hank came up the right way as a coach, and when he had his opportunity to run his own program, he was ready.
As a result of Joe Zimmerman's work in those 70s, that Shaw has developed to be a factor in the Catholic League. And Hank builds upon that foundation.
One of the things I learned from Joe Zimmerman was, just consistently work and treat people good and treat the kids fair.
Hank Tierney proves that you don't have to have played a down of football to be a great coach. He was a student of the game. He wasn't an athlete. But he learned from Joe Zimmerman, and he developed his own style of coaching, and he was a teacher.
Hank's a very intelligent guy, and he's an intense guy, and he's a guy that's going to put in the time.
He was a ball of fire, but he was a guy that had a whole bunch of knowledge, whole bunch of energy, and he always wanted to teach you, and he always wanted you to make sure that you're doing things the right way on and off the field.
Confident, but intense. He was a very confident coach.
He knew his football so he could be confident.
I never have been lacking for confidence in anything that I do.
Here comes the hammer, you know, and he comes in and he'll take you down. And it's not that he was intimidating us, that we didn't want to let him down. You know, just like he never let us down on anything. And if he said he was going to do something for us, it got done. And you feel like if you screw up on a play, hey, you're letting him down because he put so much time into it, you know, to make sure it's right.
Put a lot of time and effort into it. And of course, I'd been on the West Bank all my life, so I knew the ins and outs, and I knew the ins and outs of the school.
The school was a blue-collar high school that everybody there, you know, worked hard, and you know, even the people in the lunchroom worked hard, and you know, the brothers worked hard, and everything at Shaw you had to earn.
Hank was a salesman, and he knew how to convince these sons of blue-collar workers to get a good Catholic education and have a ticket to college because the teams were going to be successful.
He lifted that program, Shaw, even though Joe Zimmerman did a great job. Hank kind of brought it to another level. I often wondered why Joe left, because he had a good team coming back. I couldn't even screw it up, you know, and Mickey Guidry and Ron Sancho and Nacho Albergamo and all them guys were on that team. You know, so we went 9-1 and won a district championship.
Even with a shared crown in year one, Tierney's coaching tenure might have been in jeopardy, if not for his developing family ties.
I often think that Josephs saved my job back around 1984. You know, we went 9-1 my first year, and then we went 5-5, and the outlook was bleak. We had lost 17 seniors, and we only had 4 returning starters. One of them was a little skinny tailback named Mickey Joseph. And I probably made one of the better decisions in my coaching life in 1985 when I said, well, let's put Mickey at quarterback.
My junior year, we was picked to probably finish 3rd or 4th in the district, and we came on top. We eventually lost to the state champions, John Eric, that year by, you know, 6 inches. You know, we would have beat them. I thought we'd have went on in one state.
Moving Mickey at quarterback made a lot of things easier for us because he would turn bad players into good players. And there's probably not been a person who had an impact on a Catholic league, probably other than John Forcade, particularly at Shaw, than Mickey Joseph.
Like the Forcade Eagles of 1977, the Joseph-led team in '86 had Tierney and Shaw on the verge of greatness.
He probably had his best team in '86, was when Mickey Joseph was a senior. He was a parade All-American. He went to Nebraska, and they got beat in the second round in one of the biggest upsets in history by John McDonough.
And of course, we won a state championship the next year in a team that was picked second last, you know, in the district, so you never know.
What Tierney did know was that he had another Joseph under center. In 1987, it was sophomore Vance Joseph.
I knew my little brother, my younger brother, I knew he was talented. I knew Vance was always a talented quarterback, and that he listened and he picked up things very fast.
And with an unsung team, they come back and win the state championship in '87 after Mickey had graduated. So they were upset victim in '86, and they sprung the upset in '87 by coming back and winning.
Great accomplishment, tremendous coaching job, one of the best he's ever done. I think that he would tell you that because they've had some great teams, much more talented than that team that did not win it. And that team that did win it was certainly a team that maxed out its potential. So I think that that also speaks volumes that he got the most out of that team because he had better teams than that, which did not win.
In addition to winning Shaw's first state championship, Vance Joseph also led Tierney's team back to the championship game in 1988. All in all, with Mickey and Vance at quarterback, Shaw won 5 district crowns.
We had 5 straight years of Josephs. I often think 5 years, 50 games, and probably saved Hank Tierney's job with them Josephs under the center.
But it was more than football with Tierney and the Josephs. It was family and extended family.
There's 2 other Josephs now, cousins, first cousins. Derek Joseph, 4-year starter at quarterback, led us to the state championship game against West Monroe, 1997. And Terry Joseph, who was a great baseball player, great receiver, and is currently the secondary coach for the Tennessee Volunteers.
We used to go after the game on the field, run around the field, and think we were Mickey. And then years later, I am Mickey.
You know, so anybody last name Joseph, I'm trying to get him on my team.
Coach Hank, Shaw, Joseph. That's how it was.
And that's the relationship. That's what people don't understand about our family with Coach Hank. He's like he was part of the family.
He's family. He's a second father.
I used to tell my wife, bury me on that practice field. I was never going to leave that school. I was going to coach there for as long as I was going to coach. I just never had any intentions on ever leaving. And there was no one more surprised than me when it happened.
At the height of his tenure, a new administration at the Marrero School was looking to avoid LHSAA penalties, so they forced Tierney out in 2002. Later, the investigation put the blame squarely on the previous administration, and Tierney was cleared. But the damage was done. The ties were broken.
The whole thing about the Catholic League, I just think, you get an emotional attachment, to the kids and to the school, and I had that for sure. So it'll always be a piece of my heart for Archbishop Shaw, yet at the same time, I'm still, still bothered by how the whole thing came down.
At Shaw, Tierney won a share of 12 Catholic League championships. His Eagles went to the state playoffs 18 times in 19 years. But his legacy cannot fully be assessed by his record.
He's my mentor. We had some good times. We had some good times. He was fun to coach with, and he taught me how to coach.
I don't think there's one individual that's ever coached in Louisiana that has a larger coaching tree than he has. When you think about the number of guys that became head coaches that were part of his staffs, it speaks volumes about why he was so successful, because he recognized young talent, surrounded himself with them, nurtured them, and then ultimately they went on to become great coaches.
And he taught young coaches how to be coaches.
I was a get out of football. I coached 3 years, and I wrote him a letter, sight unseen. I didn't know the man. I said, look, I'm looking for a job. I just got let go at East Ascension High School. And he says, come on, I'll take you to Shaw. And I learned how to coach football with Hank Tierney and had fun doing it.
You can go on and on about Hank, of what he teaches his young coaches, and look at the list of those young coaches that are out there that all have head coaching jobs now.
His tree, I think it was 12 head coaches that he produced from his staffs along the way. And, to think those guys were working as assistants under him. You look at the names of the people that were on that staff and what they went on to do.
There's no doubt in my mind I became a head coach because I worked for Hank Tierney.
Hank lived it, slept it. He loved football. He took care of his kids, took care of his assistant coaches, and he developed his coaches.
I was a bad player who got cut, so certainly wasn't coaching because of my football prowess, but I was fortunate to be around a lot of good people who helped me and who helped me become a good coach, particularly Joe Zimmerman, a great man. And I tried to, have the same effect on my assistants, tried to help them the way he helped me.
In the final box score, this is the reason Hank Tierney is one of the most accomplished coaches in Louisiana prep history.
What I tried to preach there and what my assistants, I think, took with them, that we were trying to develop a total person through football. And I believe that if I have a legacy, and that's a word that often gets taken out of context, it would be that I tried to really make these people better people.
In 1995, an animated movie took us to infinity and beyond. 1995 was also the year that Archbishop Rummel hired one of their own to reestablish Raider pride. Jay Roth would take the program beyond its glorious past. He would also take his place among the likes of John Kalbacher, Otis Washington, Bobby Conlon, and Hank Tierney. Jay Roth would now be included in the conversation of the Catholic League's greatest coaches.
Jay's record speaks for itself in that he has won more games than anyone who has ever coached in the league. And that in my mind puts him in that conversation.
I could go on and on about the guys that coached in this league that were terrific coaches and accomplished guys. But Jay Roth won more games than every one of them. He also won 2 state championships.
As good a coach as there is, still one of those old school guys that really believes in sound fundamentals and character development.
I'm not a Rummel fan by any means, but I was a Jay Roth fan.
Like Hank, a little bit like Bobby Conlon.
Unlike Hank Tierney and Bob Conlon, Jay Roth was an athlete.
Jay Roth, quarterback, Archbishop Rummel.
Of course, Jay played for me, and special person. Very intelligent, very focused.
And the Offensive Player of the Year is quarterback Jay Roth of Rummel.
He led Rummel on an 80-yard drive to upset St. Augustine, who went on to win the state championship that year, beating them both years in a row when they won the state championship, which was amazing, and all of a sudden Jay Roth's a star.
Rummel stopped St. Aug from being perfect 2 years.
St. Aug was state champs 78, 79. They were 14-1. And both of them were losses to Archbishop Rummel.
That kind of told you a little bit about the kind of leader that he could be and the kind of team that he could lead.
He was one of the best quarterbacks in the city when he was there. He learned from his father, so he had excellent coaching.
Man, you went out there and you showed some rate of pride. But man, you're gonna need more rate of pride. You can beat this football team.
Easton Roth certainly helped him on his way, put him on the right track.
Fellas, I love you.
I loved, I idolized my father. You know, growing up, I used to think the Rummel Raiders could beat the Saints back in the day. I just thought that he was the greatest thing, you know. Then I had a chance to play for him, which was really special, and have some success there. And I ended up following in his footsteps.
That path wasn't clear-cut after Jay Roth lost his first football coaching job.
And I had a degree in marketing, and I decided I was either going to coach for Bobby Conlon or Hank Tierney, or I was getting out of coaching. And I sent him both letters. Hank responded to me. I didn't know Hank from Adam. And I knew right there if I was going to coach, I had to see what it was like to coach for one of the best guys. And it couldn't have been a better place to really get my act together as a high school coach under Hank.
Jay worked for me for 4 or 5 years, and one of the best coaches I've ever had. You know, so knowing he was going to be successful, it was always kind of good in my heart to see that Jay Roth was doing well, as I knew he would. And he's one of the best coaches in high school football in this country.
From what he learned as an assistant and as an athlete, he put his own personality into and created an entirely different animal.
That animal of Severn Avenue captured 12 Catholic League championships outright or shared. Roth had 23 winning seasons in 24 years on the job, but the praise was always placed elsewhere.
The thing that I think set Jay Roth apart was the fact that he never made it about himself, never.
We had some good players. We had some good players that bought into what we call Raider pride, bought into the Raider tradition, and they were fun to coach. And we had some good coaches to coach them.
Much like his mentor, Hank Tierney, he hired good people and he let them do their jobs. No ego, and to me, the most successful coaches are those guys.
But the biggest thing was surrounding myself with good coaches. You know, when I looked at Don Peret's staff and I saw my father, Al Pontiff, George Ron, Henry Randall, Randy Johnson, those were guys that could coach football.
But I sensed right away a willingness to jump in there and work hard. And he worked hard, and the kids he coached loved him.
When you on the field for Coach Roth, you gave it your all, and because you didn't want to let him down.
The guy is just, he's a workaholic. He's into it 100%. He does everything. He cuts the grass. I think he even washes the uniforms, and he loves it. He is just Rummel. He bleeds red, white, and blue, no doubt about it.
Raiders, listen to the fans, have won the 5A state championship. Jay Roth sprints on the field, his coaches sprint on the field, the celebration begins.
I know the fear of failure just drives me. I mean, that was from day one as a head coach. Just fear of failure to me is so strong that I can't enjoy a victory until the year's over.
He got teams to the playoffs and the championships that maybe didn't belong there, that he got the most out of them.
They've had very good personnel and they've had average personnel, but he always seems to be in the mix at the end, and that's pretty much unheard of. So he is the perfect fit for that school.
One of the things that makes the Catholic League special is the amount of pride that everyone shows in their school. And for my alma mater to go out and hire one of their own, one of the best to ever wear their uniform, to be the head coach back in 1994, sure, things still had to happen on the field beyond that, but that was, you know, a very defining moment there. And then obviously what then happened over the next 24 years with, with Jay as head coach speaks for itself and what he was able to accomplish with those teams over those years.
What Roth accomplished was bringing Raider pride back to Metairie. Going beyond Rummel's past, he guided the team to consecutive state crowns in 2012 and 2013, the school's first state championships. In 2009 and 2015, he took Rummel to 2 other state finals.
Right up there with the dynasty that St. Aug had for that 75, 78, 79. That Rummel run of 9, 12, 13, 15, getting to the Dome 4 times in that short span and winning 2. I think it ranks up there with everybody else's success, past nostalgic success that the Catholic League's had, yes.
When you do put numbers next to it and you look at the winningest coaches in the history of the Catholic League, Jay's at the top of the list.
228 total wins, but the victory measured is greater when you take into account the lives that were changed.
I think the most important thing I learned from Coach Roth was tradition, doing the right thing on and off the field and just being a great person.
You look at what his players have accomplished on the field, off the field, once they've left Severn Avenue and gone on to do things. And the fact that he can confidently hand off a program to Nick Monica, and the first year he hands it off, another state championship comes from that.
Interception! That's your ball game! Donovan Kaufman! The Rummel Raiders, state champs!
Any coach would tell you that that's what they take the most pride in. Wins and losses are great, but what the young men that come out of your program go on to accomplish, whether it's on the field or off, is significant as well.
I knew Billy Murphy at Jesuit. I knew Coach Washington at St. Aug. I got to coach against Bobby Conlon. I coached with Hank Tierney and coached against him. I coached with Mark Sonji. I coached against J.T. Curtis. That to me, just the longevity I've had in this league since being a kid, seeing these guys, when I first came around in the late 60s, early 70s, observing the Catholic League and playing in it and coaching in it, I'm lucky to span this whole era, this whole different era of Catholic League football.
Generations from now, when the glory of that era is completely revealed, Rummel's Jay Roth will be the focus of that conversation. On Friday, August the 26th, 2005, New Orleans was thinking football. The Saints were playing an exhibition game in the Louisiana Superdome, and high school players were hitting the field in jamborees across the state. Hope was high on the Holy Cross sidelines.
Friday night before the storm arrived, the storm was Monday morning, the 29th, 2005, I did the West Bank Optimist Jamboree. Holy Cross was in the Jamboree. And I walked out of there that night and I said, that's the best Holy Cross team I've seen in a long, long time. They're really good.
We felt we had a good chance to be a state champion. We had some great players. Barry Wilson had done an excellent job in the coaches to get us going, so we had high expectations.
We felt like we had a great football team that year. We had just had a great jamboree, and then it all blew apart.
3 days later, Hurricane Katrina made landfall. And for New Orleans and Louisiana, everything changed forever.
Katrina was not a near-death experience. It was a cataclysmic death experience of not just of a city notionally, but of histories, of neighborhoods, of families, of people.
Hurricane Katrina was a natural disaster made worse by human mismanagement and missed opportunities. Thousands died. Hundreds of thousands were homeless. In his role for Entergy New Orleans, it was Rod West's job to restore power to his hometown. It also gave this Brother Martin standout a front row seat to the devastation.
The history of New Orleans, as we'd known it before 2005, was threatened to be literally washed away because the city that I saw withstand the storm, but then fall and succumb to the resultant flooding. Neighborhoods that I had played in, parks, playgrounds, were evaporated.
I think I would ever see another building or my home in New Orleans East, as a matter of fact. I think I'd see it.
The floodwaters forgave nothing.
80% of the city was covered in water, and City Park Stadium was in water. You know, it was like a big swimming pool, big giant pool. Yeah, couldn't believe it. Was hard to believe.
My entire high school history is in that stadium under that water.
The aerial view revealed more than destruction.
It was that level of devastation from the sky that just was memorable, and I had just had this immediate flashback of the sound of the cleats walking in from the bus to the locker room, and memories of trying to tackle Mickey Joseph in the mud, you know, all of that flashback as I'm in a helicopter, and it affected me more than I had given it credit for.
The schools fared no better.
Just catastrophic for so many people, but what happened at Holy Cross was beyond devastating. It was very sad because it was pretty obvious from day one that not only was it going to be a long road back, but you wondered if it would ever come back.
It was total devastation. It was just hard to describe.
The fatality of the whole experience just kind of sunk in, that we weren't coming back to this campus and in these buildings again.
I questioned the reality of whether or not Holy Cross would continue to exist. A school that was founded in 1849 might have seen its last days in August of 2005.
It was a test of will and determination and survival, and it was a test that you couldn't prepare for.
Prepared or not, Holy Cross was ready to answer the call, as was head coach Barry Wilson.
The athletic director, the principal, and Charlie DeGaines, the headmaster, called me, and I was in Memphis staying at another coach's house. They asked us, do we think we can get the football team together? And I said yes. They felt like that was the only way we could save the school, was to get the football team together to draw students.
When they heard we were going to play football, they came back.
We opened up a school at Dunham, going from 3 in the afternoon or 4 till 9, practicing in the morning at Millersville with no equipment, working out of a truck.
You know, we found a grammar school, let us use their playground for practice. YMCA let us use their facilities to get ready for practice and to feed the boys after practice, because you had to practice during the day. You were going to school from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night.
It was the families that really drove us to really gave us the impetus to really come back, because they knew the importance of a 159-year legacy at the time. They couldn't let that go.
It wasn't for the parents, it would not have happened. Someone who had to sacrifice a great deal. I had parents driving who their houses were not destroyed in Metairie, were driving to Baton Rouge every day to bring their sons to school and wait for them to finish practice and drive them back home.
It was the demand from the outcry, I think, from those folks that really gave us the courage to move forward, to move on.
What Barry Wilson did and what Holy Cross did to gather whatever kids they could together, go to Baton Rouge, find a place to practice, and put together a football team, I think it helped keep the school going, to be honest with you.
We were the first school back after the hurricane, in which I think made Jesuit come back and made Rummel come back.
My hat goes off to Barry Wilson at Holy Cross. When he called me, and I was living in Carencro after Katrina, he called me and said, Jay, we're getting back together. We're going to try to get the kids back in town to play. I said, Coach, you're crazy. You've lost the most, and you're the one that wants to get this league back together. Jay, it's important that we do this, because he was part of Catholic League. He played in it, and now he was coaching in it. I thought he was crazy.
A shortened season was the hope. One game was a must, the rivalry game.
They can talk about, oh, this game's a rivalry, that game's right. When Jesuit Holy Cross play, it's the game.
The Holy Cross Jesuit football means a great deal to the city of New Orleans because it reinforces the history of the city, the heritage of the city. Two schools that have been playing each other since 1922.
It's as good as any in the state, if not the country. It means so much to so many people. To this day, they still draw over 10,000 for that game. In this day and age, that's remarkable.
It's the Super Bowl of the year for probably both schools, but that year it was particularly important because we had to show our communities and the city, that we were back. Both schools were back. And it was business as usual, rivalry, football as usual.
To preserve the state's longest continuous rivalry, Holy Cross reached out to their nemesis, Jesuit High School. Luckily, the head coaches, Wilson and Jesuit's Vic Umont, went way back, all the way back to Dauphine Street.
Vic, when he first came to Jesuit about 3 years earlier, brought with him one of his old classmates, Barry Wilson. Barry Wilson and Vic Umont played side to side on a Holy Cross championship team back in '63.
They played together, and Charlie DeGange, our headmaster, they were all in that '63 team.
Barry later became the head coach at Holy Cross.
I called Vic and I said, Vic, you've got to get Jesuit to come back. And he said they had called him, and I think he was in California at that time.
And he was in California living with his daughter. He and his wife had lost everything in New Orleans. They had lived in Lakeview. So I called Vic and said, Vic, we're starting football back on Monday. He came in Monday morning. We worked Monday through Friday with no pads, no hitting. I think we had about 40 or 50 kids back.
On Saturday, 5 days after Umont's return home, his team, in borrowed pads from Brother Martin High School, took the field at Joe Yeti Stadium in Metairie.
Everyone was just so happy to be there. They were back at a school event. No one really was concerned except the coaches with the winning and losing.
United by a common history and driven by a collective passion to persevere, Jesuit and Holy Cross meet on the gridiron for the 87th consecutive time. But this one meant more.
It meant the survival of the rivalry. It meant the continuation of Holy Cross School. Even though I played in a state championship game in front of 30,000 people in Tulane Stadium, but the mere fact that we played the Katrina game ranks above that.
To come back and to sit on a Saturday and watch their sons play that rivalry game, it just sent a symbolic message to everyone that, hey, we're going to be normal again.
It was almost a surreal type experience. How did this happen? How did a school that was totally destroyed, how do we pull this off? I think the good Lord had a hand in continuing this tradition.
For the city, it was these traditions that provided the foundation to rebuild. In tradition, there was hope.
I don't know that anybody realized it until after the fact exactly what had happened. But for Barry Wilson and for Vic Umont to do what they did and to make that game happen, it was bigger than football.
The city was on its way back. It's on its way back.
Holy Cross Jesuit continuing to play was a sign that Katrina will not wipe us off the face of the earth.
And those kids were a part of history, not just the history of the Catholic League, but their fingerprints are part of the history of the rebuild of New Orleans post-Katrina, because they showed up. They didn't have to win, they didn't have to lose. The significance of that game was not the offensive or defensive or special team strategy. The significance of that game was that they showed up.
Change had always been a part of the Catholic League's history. Gone was Redemptorist and Holy Name of Mary. St. Aloysius merged with Corrier-Zoo to become Brother Martin. Rebuilt Chalmette High had been in and then out of the league, and De La Salle exited when it became co-ed. But in 2014, the more things changed, the more they seemed the same. This year, Jesuit would return to the Superdome for a state championship for the first time since 1978.
Mark Sanji had to step in to coach that team when they made a change at the last minute, and he inherited a staff that was a really good football staff, but a tough job to manage guys that weren't your guys, that were your staff, and allow them to do their jobs, and I think it all came together beautifully.
Sanji's last-minute hire, after stepping away from the game, conjured up memories of the hiring of a Catholic League coaching legend, Jesuits Ken Tarzetti, back in 1958.
The Jesuit priest decided this was the man that was going to resurrect the program, and they had to find Ken Tarzetti, and they had to find him fast because the season was just 6 weeks away.
I could not have inherited a better senior class. Keep this in mind, they got a new head coach with about 3 weeks to spare going into fall practice, and that could have been disastrous. These guys welcomed me with open arms, and I knew I had something that was special.
That was a team, if you want to call them a team of destiny, whatever it might be, but they put it together late in the year and played some great football.
Like the '78 team, Jesuit would battle for the state crown against a gridiron giant, John Curtis, winner of 4 consecutive championships and 26 overall titles. But this sequel in the Dome was not to be a repeat.
I think it was very, very much like Rocky Balboa stepping in the ring and not going down and fighting the whole 12 rounds. And when the smoke cleared, Rocky was standing in the middle of the ring.
Incomplete, and that should do it. The Blue Jays are going to be state champs.
The scoreboard told the score, but not the entire story. It could not speak to the 54 years between this game and Jesuit's previous state football title, when Tarzetti's team, led by Pat Screen, defeated LaGrange in 1960.
The Jesuit Blue Jays are state champs in football.
Oh, I think it meant so much to so many people. I don't think the kids on that team, I know I don't realize fully what a great thing it was. I don't think the kids that night did.
Obviously, it's been half a century since they'd won a championship in football, and that was a big night.
Right after the game, there were probably about 2,000 people right outside of the dome when we walked out at 1 o'clock in the morning, still there, grown men weeping.
This was more than a championship.
Well, it had personal meaning to me. My whole family were Jesuit people. And when the game ended, and of course I had a frog in my throat and I hesitated and I said, well, I just want to say I wish my dad had lived long enough to see this. I lost him just a couple years before that, and I know how much this would have meant to him. He loved this school. And I'll never forget that as long as I live, because I think that kind of represented the whole feeling about how Jesuit people felt about that. 54 years is a long time. Pat Screen was a long time ago. Ken Tarzetti was a long time ago. So to see that school be able to come back and accomplish that and beat an iconic program, to win it, I think, meant so much.
Today on the fields of the Catholic League, tomorrow's legends still play.
And now Kaufman shot out like a cannon.
We had a young man in the state championship game, Donovan Kaufman, that turned a kickoff 95 yards with 2 minutes left. He'll be remembered for that play. So It doesn't have to be nostalgia to be remembered as playing a glory part in this league.
40, 50 years from now, some of the things that we just saw in these recent years are games, plays, that people are still going to be talking about.
For those that put on the uniforms of St. Aloysius or Koryezu, or Holy Name of Mary or Redemptorist, their glory gain did not fade with the passing of time, nor the closing of their schools. For each player, each participant, and for all the fans of the Catholic League, the moments and the memories of the competition have made them all better prepared for their own life journeys.
Lenny Quick, the ball carrier.
That experience has directed my life, so to speak, to always strive to be the best that one can be.
For those of us who played, we say that the only people whose uniforms are guaranteed to stay clean are the people who sit on the sideline. That's not what we do.
What was left on the field of the Catholic League has become the foundation of our present and our future. Their duty done conquers the shadows of time.
Catholic League in New Orleans, it's that web that pulls us together to kind of create that common bond of being part of that legacy, those legacies that were created years ago and continue throughout the city.
All of a sudden, that journey between where you are and where you want to be just got a lot shorter and far more realistic because we were telling stories about the journey. That's why we put the plaques up. The plaques aren't about the championship. The plaque's about the price you paid to first become the best, and then you happen to become first. That's what the Catholic League means to me. It's the journey.
The journey continues and the story grows. Stories about those who, on the field of the Catholic League, left behind them not just their all, but their glory.
Glory Days, the Catholic League of New Orleans, Part 3, is underwritten by Leonard C. Quick & Associates Consulting and Forensic Engineers, Troy, Henry & Henry Consulting, Dr. Robert Griesaber, and the Willwoods Community.